Why is your hair so straight? Like, it was literally like Lloyd Christmas. You know where you have something so before it happens that when you have it, people are like, oh, you got that haircut? I was like, I don't fit. Who's going to want to talk to me about football and going out and all this sort of thing? Until the likes of Lee Stafford come on the scene and seeing that he was very much like where I wanted to get to, in the sense of, hey everyone, and welcome to My Next Appointment. This is my brand new podcast and it's going to be launching very, very soon. This episode is basically a little pilot on showing you, the viewer, but also the guests who are going to be coming on the podcast, exactly what we're going to be looking for. So this podcast is going to be something like no other. It's going to be very different. It's going to be led completely differently. And it's a way of being able to take a look into somebody's life throughout the years, but through their haircuts and through their hairstyles and colours. So this is basically born because I'm a hairdresser. And I wanted it to be still heavily linked to hair, but I really wanted it not have to be hairdressers coming on here. I wanted it to be people in business, YouTube, social media, anything. It can be hairdressers, but I wanted it to be a way to be able to have literally anybody on the podcast, but still be very relative to what I do as an individual, which is hair. So my next appointment is obviously as if I'm in the salon, and I'll be taking my next guest into my chair and I'll be discussing their hair, but not as you know it. In the salon, people will bring inspiration pictures of where they want to go to with their hairstyle, colours and cuts. Whereas what I'm looking for is my guests to bring in pictures of hair that they've had from the past. And this is what's really going to differentiate this podcast from anything like you've watched before. So I'm going to do my own in this episode. I'm going to show you pictures of myself, and I'm going to discuss where I was in that time of my life and where it takes me through on a journey. So I'm really excited to get into this because it's something which is really cool, really fresh, completely different approach. And I can't wait to welcome guests on this podcast with a sense of freedom, in the sense of it can literally be anybody and it doesn't have to be just people in the hairdressing industry. So my first picture is this, and this is probably my first, I would say, grown-up haircut, maybe. So there's a funny story around this, because when I went from the young boy of Paul, from a side part, to this haircut, which is a gelled, shockwaves, wet look, brushed straight, and then textured with my hand, I can remember it every day in the morning. I'd have wet hair, or I'd wet my hair down, I'd put that wet look shockwaves gel through my hair, and I would just dishevel it. And there's one instance that I didn't do the dishevelment. I didn't run my fingers through it, and it was school photos. And it was frustrating in the sense that after the photos, one of my mates in school said, are you trying a new haircut or a new hairstyle? And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, why? Why is your hair so straight? Like, it was literally like Lloyd Christmas. And I was like, mate, could you not have told me that before school pictures? And he was like, I just thought you were trying something new. And I was like, no. Disaster. So from that day, I always remember, and I think it stuck with me today. Before leaving the house, I always like look at my hair and I'm like, okay, it's done to a degree. So that hairstyle there was when I sort of like went into potentially senior school, maybe? I think so. Yeah, I think it was. Went into senior school and wanted something different, and obviously growing up. But it was also a haircut that I really remember from my football days. And for some of you, most of you that don't know, I was a footballer, and I was at Aston Villa, my highest profile club. I was at Peterborough, had trials at different clubs and stuff like that. And this haircut is me as a footballer, is what I remember. And I've just got so many fond memories of that time of my life where I was playing football, really carefree, and I really think back to that time and now where I think, oh, if only I didn't get the injuries, if only I'd put more effort in. But today's world of football is completely different to where it was back then. So we had like our high profile English footballers, I suppose, and we didn't have social media, so we couldn't be looking anywhere further afield apart from VHS and Channel 4 or Match of the Day. So we were just basically seeing maybe Italian football on Channel 4 on the afternoon when I wasn't playing football, or it was Match of the Day and all you'd be seeing is Premier League football with no real foreign imports apart from like when Jurgen Klinsmann came on the scene. But we had players like Paul Gascoigne, and I just remember like Paul Gascoigne, Paul Merson, and I don't really remember why I think of Paul Merson. I think he was like a flair player, and so was Paul Gascoigne, and I try and think of others. But I mean, that generation, people probably say Paul Scholes, like David Beckham. I always remember that David Beckham goal from the halfway line. And it was always sort of, there was never these routines that footballers go through now. And it was a case of, you just watched Match of the Day and you've seen these footballers that were just good at their job. They weren't athletes. They weren't going through the regime that all these footballers go through now and the diets and everything. So I think it was a completely different generation of footballer. And I think now if I was to go back there or offer any advice for young footballers, it would be to steer clear of things that will give you an extra injury, rollerblading, skateboarding, that sort of thing that could potentially ruin your career. I don't want to say like diet at an early age, but definitely look after what you're putting into your body. So yeah, I think I could have prolonged my football career if it wasn't for doing all those sorts of things. But again, back in the day, it was just you were young. There was nothing that would really sort of make you think any different. And then you just went with it. So yeah, that was that haircut where I could go through more, where it was like my senior school year and what I did in senior school with I went to Latimer Community College, it was called then. I don't know what it's called now, something like Community Arts Centre, something like that. But this is what I really want to dive into with my guests. I want to really get into where were you in that moment of your life with that haircut, because I want to know all about it. And then it sort of feeds on to your next haircut because it's just a natural transition. So going from like school and not really knowing at school what I wanted to do. Obviously, I was really into sport and school were really trying to direct me into sport and get me down that road of doing something around that area when it came to my careers advisor, and he was very, very much set on me going into being a physiotherapist. I mean, the grades to become a physio, although I was okay at school. I mean, school education and me just it was boring. I was always like creative, which is how I found my destiny now. But they were always trying to pigeonhole me in this sport, like because I was a footballer, they'd put me in the cross country running team, and I was like, I hate this, hated it. But they wanted me to do it because I was good at sport. And then athletics, I'd be a sprinter, I'd be a long jumper, I'd be a high jumper, just because I was very sporty. And when it was my careers advisor, I actually remember sitting in that room with him, and he says, so what do you fancy doing? I said, I fancy going into a hair salon. And he was like, no. He says, you don't want to go into hairdressers. I was like, I think I do. And he's like, no, you want to go into something sporty. And I was like, do I? Like what? And he was like, go and be a physio. It's like, a physio? I've never, ever wanted to be a physio in my life. Going through all the injuries, yes, I was at a physiotherapy centre a lot. But it didn't mean I wanted to be a physio, but they just sort of like pigeonholed me down that route. And there was another guy in my year, he wanted to go to that physiotherapy centre. It was like in-betweeners, where they wanted to be like, he wanted to work in the garage and he wanted to work at the paper, and they got mixed up. That was, I mean, he didn't go into a hair salon, but it was like, oh yeah, you're going to be a physio. And I got there, and I remember one of the mistakes I made when I was there, and he was like, right, the phone's ringing, obviously trying to get you as much career experience as possible. Do you want to go and get it? I was like, yeah. Went in there. Hello, Rothwell Physiotherapy Centre. And it was like, oh, I'm looking for an appointment. And the guy was booked up. But to be honest, I'd like so little experience. I was an amateur in this, and I'd just seen this little gap, and 12 o'clock. So I thought, oh, there you go, bang it in there. Turns out that was his lunch break. So when it got to that day, and he looked at his diary in the morning, he was a big Man City fan as well. And back then, Man City were in the League One, not the French league, but not the Championship, like the one below it. And he was avid, like, I always remember he reminded me of Gordon Strachan. And Gordon Strachan, I think Gordon Strachan at that time was at City as manager, was he? I'm not too sure now. Anyway, when we got to that day, and I remember him saying, who put this? Because he had someone else working there as well. And he was like, I think they've put an appointment in my lunch break. And he's like, who's that handwriting? And I was like, it's mine. He went, that's my lunch. I was like, oh, really sorry, but it didn't say lunch. It was just a gap. He's like, yeah, no, I leave my gap as my lunch. I was like, oh, well, how was I supposed to know? And he sort of said, oh, okay, yeah, I suppose that's a learn for me. If there's someone using the diary that's never used it before, how were you supposed to know that 12 o'clock was my lunch? I didn't. So he took it well, but then on that day, maybe go and pick up his lunch because he was with clients all day and he could like go in between. It's absolutely fine. But yeah, it was okay, but I didn't really enjoy it. It was just one of them experiences that made me experience that I didn't want to be a physio. And then I went through school with that haircut. And then I remember in year 12 or 13, 12, I think, I went to a new hair salon. Oh my God. So from my, this haircut, and I wanted to keep it. I went there and I just said, oh, I want this but shorter. She was like, yeah, no worries. Had a little bit of a fringe and everything like that. And I remember sitting there in the mirror, just looking. And then she stood in front of me, which I'd never experienced in my life, with a hairdresser coming in front of me. I was always going to a barber who was always like here and at the back. She stood in front of me and she was, I'm just going to work on your fringe. And I was like, yeah, no worries. I want to keep a lot of it. She was like, yeah. There was a lot of hair coming down my face. And I said, that's not all my fringe, is it? She went, no. And I was like, oh, okay, no worries. She moved away and she'd cut my fringe to my hairline. And I was like, I've got no fringe. She went, no, but this is better. I was like, no, it is absolutely not. So from that point, I grew my hair because I just thought, no, I'm not going to go to someone else and then butcher my hair again. So I just started to grow it, which it grew and it grew and it grew. And I remember when I left school, going into a bar, and this haircut here, this one here was sort of like my next big haircut. And I remember walking into a bar and I seen a guy from school, and they still had the same hair from school, whereas my hair had grown. And they just laughed and they were like, your hair, mate? I was like, yeah, it's growing it. And it was before like the indie scene, it was before all that. And then my haircut literally blew up, that people were having it, and this whole Kasabian, Arctic Monkeys sort of like hair was coming about, and I'd already had it. And then, you know, where you have something so before it happens that when you have it, people are like, oh, you got that haircut? And I was like, no, mate, I've been growing this because I had a catastrophe of a haircut. So it's just happened to be, I was into indie music. That was sort of like my scene, and the hair sort of like fell in with it. And it just happened that it was like bang on trend. And then I started dabbling with colour, as you can see, blondes, putting like red in, took it really dark brown. And that period of my life with that hair was where I was really sort of like messing about with my hair. Not me, in a hair salon, a new hair salon, the one my mum went to. And it's called Extreme Lengths. It's still going now, actually. And that's where I really started to get the experience of being in a salon, seeing what it was like, and thinking, actually, I'd quite like to do this. But during that time, we went to Greece with my mates and we had a massive holiday, and I wanted the party to continue. And we were all deferred a year of university. So we were like, are we going? So we were like, yeah, we'll go for the party. Which is the worst thing to do. The worst thing to do. Go to university just to party. Anyway, we did. I did all right. 2 years, smashed it. But then when it got to my second year and going into my third, I was just like, this ain't for me. Again, education is not for me. And I tell you why. There was tutors that over the years, like with school, when my careers advisor was saying, no, don't do that. And like my design teacher at school saying, oh no, don't design that way, design this way. And when I was at university, it happened all again. So my design tutor, my brain, like I've found out now, which is why I've got into hair, works in a very different way. And I learnt something the other day, and I can't remember what it was called, but one of my clients told me. And it all comes apparent when I got into hairdressing college as well. So what it was I would be given a brief by my tutor and they would be like, right, this is what you want to do, go away and design. And I'd sit there. You'd got 3 months, 6 months, whatever it was, to create this design project to as if it was like a mass design company work. And I'd be given a brief. And I remember, again, we didn't have much technology to go on. Internet was a thing. But I remember going to the photocopier and we had to create a campaign for stop. And it was like a campaign to symbolise that cars weren't stopping at junctions, and there was this sort of passage of text. And then I designed this sort of stop, like, how was it? It was like an emoji face, but made with S-T-O-P. So the P was like the mouth with the tongue hanging out. The O was the nose. The T was like the eye going across like that with like that, and then the S was the hair. So I was like way ahead of my time, and I created this stop emoji, and then the passage of text, I put it on the photocopier and I sort of stretched it out so you could still read it, but it looked as if it was like either a car screeching where the tyre sort of went like that, and it went into the emoji stop. And I was just like, and I showed everyone in my class, and they were like, have you just done that? I was like, yeah, literally done it within the hour. And they were like, that's ridiculous. And I was like, what, good? And they were like, yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. That's me done. So I went to my tutor and I was like, oh, I've just done this. And this is a thing as well, when I seen this passage of text and I seen the letters of stop, I automatically envisaged this emoji and this text coming out of its mouth, sort of, or this screeching going up to its mouth. And I went up to him and he was like, okay. I was like, any good? He was like, you've got 3 months, go and design. And I was like, yeah, that is it. That's my design work. And he was like, no, that's not how designers work. Designers get it. They brainstorm, then they do this, then they do that, and then they come up with this. And I was like, okay. So I didn't really have anything else apart from that, because that's, as soon as I'm given something, I can envisage it. And let me just have a look. There's one of my clients told me it's something. I just want to have a look at this, because she was sitting in my chair the other day and she says, if I was to say to you, could you envisage an apple? Could you? And I'm like, yeah, I can see an apple. She's like, what colour? I'm like, red. It's got a shine on it. And I've got this like really vivid imagination that I can just conjure up something in my head. There's people that can't, and I can't remember what it is. So let me just type in people who can't see things in their mind. So it's aphantasia. People struggle to visualise mental images in their mind are often described as having aphantasia. This condition affects about 1 to 6% of the population. It doesn't mean a lack of imagination, but rather a different way of processing information and recalling memories. So when she told me that, I was like, wow, this is like my history is like making sense, like getting into the hairdressing industry of how I started to envisage haircuts and colours and styles. So when he said that, my tutor, I sort of went away for 3 months and sat there, and I sort of just did some scribbles and handed it in, and he got a really top mark. And he was like, you haven't really done anything, but this campaign is really good, but you really need to design the process of from inception to your final thing. I can see all you've done is do that, and then you've sort of done some scribbles. He says, so you've got a good mark, but you haven't got a great mark because there's no workings. And I'm like, the workings in my head. That whole thing was designed in my head. As soon as he said it, I seen it. So that's what I really struggled with at university. So the next thing was we were given a campaign and we had to pick like one of 3 brands, and it was Brylcreem. What was one of them? And I was like, right, Brylcreem. And we had to create a campaign to affect an audience that they weren't already hitting. And at that time, 2003, maybe, I think it was, 2004, can't remember now. David Beckham had the mohawk. It was the Euros, I think, Euro 2003 or World Cup 2003, Euros, I think. And he was like massive. And I remember Brylcreem as like an old man's product. But then I also remember that moment in time, David Beckham was like very, very current. And that was like an older audience, like lads from like, say, 13 aspiring to be David Beckham and up. So I was thinking, right, kids, start them young, get on it. So my tagline was start them young. And I took a baby from Google Images, didn't take an actual baby, took a baby from Google Images in a cot, and it just happened to be, I typed baby in a cot, and this baby had its hand on the side like this and a hand like this to grab something. I put David Beckham's mohawk on the baby, and when its hand was like that, I put the Brylcreem gel in his hand. And I remembered that, I mean, this was all, again, we're all within the hour of me being given my brief. And I remember from the past one that him saying, you need to go and design. So I didn't show anybody. I banged it in my portfolio and I went away and I just started like drawing different things and designing different things and stuff like that. And then at the end of it all, handed it in. And he was like, this is really good. Like you've captured a new audience. You've got something very current with David Beckham. You've got the baby in there, and you've got a great tagline. So this is something that's very promising that a brand could get sort of like involved in. And I sent it to Brylcreem actually once I'd done it, and they replied. And I wish I kept all this, but this is years ago. And they come back and they said, absolutely love this. This isn't something that we would run as a campaign ourselves because it's kids and our product's designed for adults, but we love the design process. We love the inspiration. Thank you so much. So I was like, that's mad that they've seen it and they've loved it. And just touching on this at the minute, we'll get into the hairdressing side of things in a bit. But with that, where I designed that was 2009. That's where we were. No, it wasn't. Before 2009, because I was doing this next thing in 2009. So that, 2003, 2004. 2009, just going to jump ahead a little bit. I was asked to do a colour degree for Matrix L'Oreal. And one of the guest days was Hooker and Young. And they were, as our inspiration day, they had this big thing gearing up. And to be honest, I wasn't supposed to be on this course. You were supposed to have 7 years plus experience. I had 14 months. So I was out of my depth completely. But did very well. And Hooker and Young wanted to show us this brand new ad campaign they were doing. And just because I've just finished dropped out of a marketing degree, I was really interested in seeing it. And it was like this big build-up of this intro video and Hooker and Young flashing lights and everything. And it come up and it was like this baby with adult hair. And I was like, what? And another baby, adult hair, another baby, adult hair. And I was like, this is mad. I did this like 5 years ago. And you just think, I sent this to Brylcreem. Did Brylcreem see it, or did an ad agency see it, or was this just like coincidence? But when it all finished, this isn't the best thing because we got off on a bad foot when I said this to them. But they were like, "What do you think?" And I was just like, "I absolutely love it." And they thought I was going to say I love it because I loved it. I did love it because I loved it, but I loved it because, and this is what I said. I said I did that 5 years ago at university, and they were like, "No, you didn't." I was like, "You what?" I was like, "What?" And they were like, "What did you do?" I was like, "I put adult hair on a baby." And they were like, "No, you didn't." I was like, "Yeah, I did." And I was like, "No, I found a mobile phone with it on there this was one of the first. This was Sony Ericsson phone with the first camera. Pixels, it probably had 1 pixel, and it had it on it. And later on in my career, I'll tell you like where we got to with catching up with them and showing them. But yeah, we got off on the wrong foot because when the later that day where we were doing stuff and we had to do like a colour application and explain why, when I've done it, they sort of dismissed it and they were like, "Oh, I remember Michael saying, 'Oh, here's Mr. Know-It-All.'" And I was like, I'm literally on a course that I'm here to learn, and I didn't mean to like upset you at all. I was just so taken back that my advert that I did at university years ago on a similar sort of concept is now their full ad campaign for their hair salon for an industry I've just got into. And then they were just like dismissive of me. So like it was a bit disappointing. But yeah, I'll tell you more about that in a bit. And then going back to this whole thing with like thinking about things, I left university and then I got into hairdressing. But before that, I was a network engineer. Once I left university, I went to work with my dad as a network engineer. And we were just putting in network infrastructures into colleges, schools, businesses. And from my dad being such a perfectionist and such a... he's got such a fine art and fine eye for detail, and his ethic of work is just unreal. I think that's where I get it from, and where I feel that I have to keep on working because my dad kept on working. Every day was a working day, and the way that he just continued to churn out this incredible work. Like when I was a kid and I'd want a WWE ring, he'd go into his garage and he'd just make me one. And it'd be better than the actual official ring. He was just, I mean, he is with everything he does. Like with this wall, like stuff like that, he just can turn his hand to anything. So I wish I could, in the sense of DIY. But when it comes to maybe creative side, that's where I sit. But yeah, him and my mum like are the reason I'm doing everything like this, because of the way they brought me up. So that's the massive for me. So yeah, I was a network engineer, and that's while I was learning to be a hairdresser at college. And I suppose this is where this hair takes me into, because it looked very hairdressery with a blonde in there and stuff like that. And yeah, I got into hairdressing, went to Tresham College night school. I was dreadful. I would miss a lot of college days to go around my mate's house, play FIFA. Not the way to do it, but I remember my college tutor saying, I'm going to get you qualified, kicking and screaming, if it's the last thing I do. And I'm so glad she did and stuck with me, because, I mean, it's changed my life, changed our family's life with everything that hairdressing has brought us. So, yeah, I mean, it's incredible to think of all of that. But yeah, getting into hairdressing and really struggling to begin with, and I started House of Hair from my parents' garage. That was basically a chair, a mirror, scissors and a comb. And I just started doing it. And then this local salon seen what I was doing, and I was out every single weekend just passing these House of Hair business cards out, building up a clientele. And they were saying, come and work for us. And eventually, after multiple sort of interviews of come full-time, I was like, I don't want full-time, it's a bit of a hobby. To then going part-time with them, to then going full-time, to then buying the salon, to then starting Paul Watts Hair in 2011. And yeah, I suppose this is where we're at with this haircut of where I am now with my own business. My hair started to get shorter again, and it's just a case of we keep on rolling. And I can see this is already nearly half an hour. This is basically just a bit of an idea for people who are coming on this podcast. This is what we're going to like draw out of you from looking at these pictures. And I can't wait to welcome the guests and bring them on the podcast to find out that little bit more about them. But I might do a part 2 of this to delve into the other haircuts, but this was just a little bit of a snippet of it. And you give you a bit more of an understanding of where I've come from and to where we are now. But yeah, I've had my salon now coming up to 13 years, 14 years, 15 years maybe. I've got no idea. But it's doing well. We opened multiple salons. We've had an employment team of over the years of like 32. I think it was our peak. And yeah, working internationally for brands, working with my sort of like the reason I picked up a pair of scissors, Lee Stafford. That's another thing like that happened in my hairdressing career, and watching the salon on Channel 4 when that was on, looking at all of them, Paul Merritt, Adi Phelan, Leo Bancroft, who else was on it? Like just looking at all those hairdressers, Terry Longdon. It was like I always wanted to work with them, and it is crazy that I have during my career. Like I've worked with Adi. I worked with Terry Longdon for Matrix, with Leo. I nearly worked with Leo at his salon. Paul Merritt, he worked for Unite, and I was working with Unite. And then Lee Stafford, back in the day when it was called The Hairdresser, I think, on Living TV, when that came on, I was like, the reason I really didn't think I could be a hairdresser was because of where I'd come from. Being a bit of a Jack the Lad, being a footballer, being a straight male in a very female-dominated industry where the males in it were gay, I was like, I don't fit. Who's going to want to talk to me about football and going out and all this sort of thing? Until the likes of Lee Stafford come on the scene and seeing that he was very much like where I wanted to get to, in the sense of having salons maybe, or a brand, or working internationally. And in 2013, get an email from him, I want you to come and work with me, was just like crazy. So that's been a good half an hour. I'm just going to leave that there and probably dive into a bit more. But if you want to be a guest on my Next Appointment podcast, send me a message. You can email me at paulwattshair@gmail.com. And yeah, let me know in the comments down below what you think about this podcast. I want it all to be in person. So I do want everything to be in my studio. I do want to have, I don't know if you've already noticed, my hairbrushes as the mics. And I want it to be 4 pictures of your hair throughout your life and really, really get to know you. So thank you so much for watching. And this is the birth of my Next Appointment podcast. And I look forward to welcoming you to episode 1 with my first guest. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode.